Hey everyone, today we're going to show you how to replace the rear shocks on your Nissan Titan with Bilstein 5100s. You'll need a breaker bar, a 19mm wrench, a ratchet, a 3 or 6 inch extension, and a 3/4 inch socket. Here is the exact part number you'll need for the first generation Nissan Titan. Let's get right into it. Before trying to remove the shocks, we highly recommend you spray down the nut and bolt with PB Blaster or other penetrating oil. These bolts can be a real pain to remove, so you may want to start spraying them several days in advance. Make sure you get both sides, the nut and the bolt head, and make sure you spray both the upper and the lower sections of the shocks. With those sprayed down, let's start removing the shocks. Full disclosure, we broke the nuts beforehand to give you a more streamlined video. We'll be starting with the lower section on the driver's side. Grab your 3/4 inch socket, which will go on the bolt side, and your 19mm wrench, which will go on the nut, and ratchet away. If the bolt is being particularly difficult, this is where you'll grab your breaker bar and still use the 3/4 socket. Slide the bolt out and give the bolt and the nut a visual inspection. If the threads look good and nothing is stripped, reuse them. You won't get new hardware with your 5100s. Moving up the shock, we are now going to unfasten the upper section. We'll show a few different angles, but just like before, you'll be placing your 19mm socket on the nut. So now we'll move under the wheel well to show you where to access the bolt. Here under the wheel well, you'll see a circular opening that allows access to the bolt. The driver's side is actually pretty easy to get access to, and this is where your extension will come into play. Add your 3 or 6 inch extension on with your 3/4 socket, and you'll remove the bolt just like we did with the lower section. You may need the breaker bar at first, but once the nut has broken loose, it's an easy path forward to ratchet off the bolt. Now you'll need to push the bolt out of the bracket. Lifting up on the shock will make this easier on you, but if you get stuck, a great little hack is to grab the bolt from the lower section and use it to push the upper bolt out. The shock will drop right out of the bracket. Now we can unfasten the lower section of the passenger side. Same deal here, 3/4 inch socket on the bolt and a 19mm on the nut. Quick visual inspection, and then move on. The upper section of the passenger side is a little more tricky, but we'll show you exactly what to do. If you look at the top of the wheel well, you'll notice a piece of plastic trim covering access to the bolt. So we have to get that out of the way. It's held into place by a single Phillips head fastener that you see here. Grab your favorite drill or screwdriver and unfasten the screw. Nothing difficult about getting that off, just don't lose it or you'll have to replace it. You'll also see a metal bracket that fits onto the plastic trim. Don't lose that either, and we'll show you why at the end of the video. You can either pull the trim out of the way or remove the whole thing, but just know that it isn't necessary. Right behind the trim, you'll see the bolt head that our 3/4 inch socket will go on. Now we'll remove it like we've done all the rest. Here are the old Rancho shocks. They've been completely worn out at this point, and it was definitely time to replace them. So here are our beautiful brand new Bilstein 5100s. They come shipped just like you see here, and Bilstein even sends you a few decal stickers if you're into that. There is one quick thing that we want to point out. You'll notice that there's this strap going the length of the shock. Don't remove that until after your install. That strap is holding the compression, so if you remove it, the shock will expand and your install just got a lot harder. So let's get these mounted. We're starting on the driver's side. When you install these shocks, always install the upper section first. It should fit snug into the bracket and then you can slide the bolt through from the outside. Now you just have to replace the nut, which we'll hand tighten for now, and then we'll come through and torque them down when the job is all done. Before we fasten the lower section, we'll snip this zip tie that's around the boot, and that's because we'll need to compress the shock and we want it to be able to move freely. Use whatever tool you have handy, just make sure you don't cut the boot. Unfortunately, when Bilstein ships the shocks to you, they're already longer than they need to be. You can see that there's no way that it's going to fit into the bracket. That means we have to compress them. And since we did the top section first, we can actually push the shock upward enough to slide the bolt through. After sliding the bolt through, we hand tighten the nut just like we did the upper section. Moving to the passenger side, again, start with the upper section. Slide the bolt through and hand tighten the nut. The bottom section of the passenger side is the same as the driver's side, so you'll compress the shock up, slide the bolt through, and then hand tighten the nut. With everything installed and hand tightened, we can now ratchet the nut. We're doing just the exact reverse of what we did earlier, so you'll need your 3/4 socket and your 19mm wrench. When you're ready to torque down the bolts, you'll be torquing them down to 111 foot-pounds. Tighten and torque the top section as well, then go do the other side. Don't forget to fasten the trim on the passenger side. Remember how we said not to lose that metal bracket? Well, here's what happens if you refasten the trim without it. Initially, it looks okay, but you'll notice that without the metal bracket, the screw is loose. The trim is loose, everything moves around, and that's because there's nothing for the screw to grab onto. Here we've replaced the bracket on the trim and we'll refasten. You'll see that there's very little movement from the trim and there is no movement from the screw, which is exactly what you want. So again, do not lose that metal bracket. That's all you have to do to install the Bilstein 5100 rear shocks on your Nissan Titan. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you next time for another Titan Tutorials video.